So this one is an old pair of gray jeans, and I've marked a little bit of the pattern that's going to be on it. It's just going to be feathers. This thread is a polyester 40 weight embroidery thread, but it works good for this quilting. Here's a piece that I have the other side of the bag, and all the quilting is done on that. And so this is similar to what the other side will be. The design on it will be a little bit different, but basically a feather design with a pebble background. I've got my Singer 66. This is a red eye and a treadle, and that's all set up to go. And I have a quilting hopping type foot in, and I'm going to start by doing the center line of the quilting. If I do that first, and I've just drawn it on with a chalk pencil, and it tends to want to wear off pretty easily when your hands are rubbing over it. So I'm going to start by just going over that with the thread, and that way I won't lose it. A lot of people have expressed shock almost that you can use a 66 for free motion quilting, and the reason that is a lot of people have been told that they aren't a good choice because, especially on these older machines, you can't drop the feed dogs, and that the bobbin is really not set up right because it's a drop-in bobbin instead of a vertical bobbin. And you know, I don't think it matters. You know, I did at first think that, and the more free motion quilting that I do, the more I realize it's not the machine as much as it is the operator. You just have to get used to the machine and get the speed and the tension set up right, and it's going to be different for every quilt. You'll have to readjust it for different fabric and different batting. But I am not having any trouble using the 66 for free motion quilting. The older machines of the Singer 66 had what they called back clamping feet, which means that the screw the modern feet hook on to that presser bar on the side, and they screw in like that with one of these thumb screws. The old 66 machines had a screw on the back, and so modern feet don't work. A lot of the machines have had that presser bar replaced so that with a standard one, so that you can do that. And that is the case with this machine. but they also sell, if you can find them, you can get an adapter that will attach to the back clamping piece to make it fit a side clamping foot. I have one for my other 66 red eye, and that works fine too. As I said, you can't drop the feed dogs on this, but I don't find that to be a problem whatsoever because, and it's probably hard to see, I keep forgetting to take my hands out of the way so that you can see what I'm doing better. But anyway, you probably can't see it real well, but this foot rides up and down, and when the needle is up, the pressure is up, and so the fabric will still slide. The feed dogs don't make the fabric move, and they don't really catch up on it, so it isn't a problem. I actually have some other machines where the feed dogs will drop, and I've just gotten so used to quilting on these machines where you can't drop the feed dogs that I don't even bother on the machines that I can drop them. It just doesn't seem to make a big difference to me. So it's a matter of what you get used to. This is really almost an orange colored thread, and I don't know what it's going to look like on the video, but in real life, as I'm looking at it here, once I get it into the onto the fabric, and I have to keep picking this foot up to get it over that big seam that goes down the center. That's from the center seam on the legs of the pants that these came off of. Anyway, so once I get it onto the fabric here, this thread has a almost a copper look to it, and I really like that look. I wouldn't have thought, based on how it looks on the spool, that it would look really so different on the fabric, but it does. Now, basic feather quilting, and this is pretty basic. I mean, it's something that takes a little practice, but it isn't hard. And the basic feather pattern is pretty good for this kind of quilting because it fills up a lot of space. And I'm just sort of trying this sort of all over meandering kind of design with it, because it feels, I don't know, more organic, kind of very formal design would be. When you're new at free motion quilting, your tendency, my tendency anyway, was to want to go too fast around the curves. And that's where you'll have, I think, the most problems. Around the curved part on the upper design here, you need to go a little slower around that curve, or you'll get sort of spidery looking stitches on the back. If you practice and keep looking at the back, you'll be able to tell whether or not you're maintaining a decent speed. Hopeful that this is showing up because I have a different camera angle and different tripod today, and I'm not sure whether I'm even in the frame because I can't see it. I'm saving up for a nicer camera with a better microphone so that I can do better videos for you. One of the things that might be interesting for you is how much lint I build up in one of these machines. And the thread I'm using today is not linty at all. It's a nice, smooth, shiny polyester thread, so I don't have a problem with this one. But the last couple of these that I did, I used a rather thick cotton. It was Coates and Clark cotton machine quilting thread, and I really like the way it looks, and it's really quite easy to work with, but it is linty. Let me excuse my hand here. Here's what came out of the machine when I cleaned it. That was all around the bobbin area from a couple of days of quilting. So, and that was from the fuzzy thread. So, fortunately, these older machines do not get real freaked out and fussy when there's a lot of lint in them. So I didn't have a lot of problems, but once I got that extra lint out of there and got it cleaned up, it was pretty amazing how much quieter the machine runs. After you're stitching away for several hours, sometimes you become immune to the fact that the machine is getting noisier and noisier. So I have to remind myself, periodically you gotta break it down, clean it out, and give the whole thing a good oiling. And it really does improve the whole experience. It makes your stitches come out better, and it makes it quieter. It prevents you from breaking thread. So I'm going to try from now on to remember that before I start sewing for the day, to take everything apart, which is take the throat plate off and the bobbin case out and clean all around that and give the whole machine a good oiling as just sort of part of the preparation for sewing for the day. And I think that will make all of my sewing experience turn out better. Now, if you'll notice here, I'm making the lobes on the feathers much bigger on this side than I did on the other. And that is just because I want the variety. I don't want it to look like I used a stencil. I like my quilting to be somewhat unique. And more closer to a freeform type, less rigid, more organic feeling. So I don't always want it to be just exactly perfect. I did use basting spray to get the layers stuck together. I used 505 spray on the back of the fabric to stick my sandwich together. That way I don't have to use pins. And many people will tell you that it does not gum up your needle. It doesn't get gummed up or stuck on your needle. Well, it does. I don't know if you can see it here. See that linty crud stuck on the needle? That's glued on from the spray basting. And sometimes when I have to change when I have to rethread the needle, it gets hard to do. I have to take another needle or a pin and clean out the eye of the needle so that I can get the thread in there, because it gets full of glue. So it's convenient, and I like it, and I use it all the time, but it does have its drawbacks, and that is that it does gum up a little bit. Now, a lot of people tell me that that's just because I use too much, but based on how I use, how I'm doing this, you know, there's still some give in this fabric, and it still is not perfectly stuck down, so I don't think I'm using too much. If anything, I think I could use more. But individual results may vary. I think a lot of it depends on the fabric and how porous it is and how much the glue soaks into it. Anyway, they call it temporary glue, temporary adhesive, so if it sits around for a while, it starts to dissipate and become not sticky as well. And I usually, when I'm done, I usually wash whatever project I'm working on, just to be sure that that glue comes out. So we're nearing the end of the feather part. And this is the easy part. And for me, the secret is, for everything about machine quilting, regulating the speed, and that is how fast my feet are pumping up and down to run the treadle, and how fast my hands are moving to create the design. So if I move my hands too fast, I get stitches that are much bigger. If I move my hands too slow, I get little teeny tiny stitches. So it's really about practicing to regulate your speed and get uniformity in your stitches. I forgot to mention, but I'm using a 9014 Microtex needle right now. And that seems to be doing a great job for this. I'll often use, depending on the fabric, I'll use usually a 9014, sometimes one size up from that, a 16100, but I often use a top stitch needle or a jeans needle, depending on the thread. But this polyester thread that I'm using today seems to do pretty well with this Microtex needle. So there's the feather design. Now the next step will be to do the background, and I fill that all in with little pebbles. And basically that's just a bunch of little circles. And you can make those as big or as small as you'd like. On this, because this is going to be the side of a tote bag, I like to put almost as much stitching in it as I can. And the reason is because when you quilt very densely, you make the finished piece stiffer, and so it'll give the tote bag more body. If I wanted to do that with less stitching and still get the body, I would add a heavy iron-on interfacing to the inside before I did the quilting. But I usually find that if I just do a lot of heavy quilting on it, it makes it stiff enough to make it work. So that's the circles, or the pebble stitches, and have to finish filling the rest of the fabric with that, and it'll be done. I have a tendency when I'm doing this part after a few minutes to sort of get a little bored with it and start going too fast and making my stitches become much larger. And it happens slowly and you don't realize that it's happening. So be aware of that. Keep your rhythm and keep going slow and steady, and you'll get a better end result. Especially when you're using contrasting thread, it's really important that your stitches look good. If the thread matches, you'll hardly see the individual stitches. You'll just see the texture that's created. So if you're uncertain as to how good your stitching is going to be, it might be a good idea to start out with a matching thread until you're a little more confident with your stitching. Only problem with that is it's harder to see what you're doing. So if you're going to use matching thread, I recommend working with really bright light, preferably daylight, shining right on your work, or a good daylight corrected lamp right over your work surface so you can see what you're doing. Trying to do this with my hands out of the way, so it's a little harder to maneuver it than it would be normally, but I wanted you to be able to see what I'm doing. So, I don't know if you can see that. That's what it'll look like once it's filled in. So, I have a lot more of that to go. But again, here's one that's finished. And as I get further out to the edges, I start making those circles bigger and keep them the smallest in between all the feathers. That helps them to stand out more and gives it more depth. But then when you get out to the edges, you can start to make them bigger. Also, when this turns into the tote bag, this part and up at the top will be kind of hidden. This becomes the bottom of the bag. And so anyway, and just in case you were curious, this is the back, and I'm just using up some really ugly fabric that I had because this won't show. When I finish the bag, it'll be lined, and so the lining fabric will cover this up. I just have the ugly fabric here to make the quilt sandwich, and nobody will ever see it when it's done. So that's what I'm doing tonight, and after I get the quilting done, I'll sew it together into a bag. That takes quite a while to get it done, but I think I'll probably put leather handles on this one, and it should be ready for sale in maybe a day or so. So anyway, happy quilting.